So I wanted to show off a couple of things that a couple of techniques that I've been tinkering with, a couple of things that I've been playing with. So 4 different things I kind of wanted to show off. First one being, and of course, now I've forgotten what TC stands for. If anybody has it, please go ahead and put it in the chat, even though I can't, as somebody I think already just beat me to it.
Transparency, consent, and control.
Thank you very much. Otherwise known as that wonderful stuff we get of, hey, please make sure you enable your this application to use your microphone, your camera, your screen sharing, etc. All that stuff that we have been having so much fun trying to do, especially in the world of remote users. So with everyone being remote, how do we guide somebody through it if they're not familiar with it? So kind of what I've been building, and this is going to be something in the toolkit, but this is kind of where I'm at in playing with it. Just some preliminary stuff about, okay, I have to get the current user, et cetera. In this case, I'm able to pass in a parameter. I'm specifying OBS as my app for this. And I've written this function. By the way, I should point out back here, I did a write-up on GitHub gists of all of this. So I did the write-up earlier this week and then started building out the presentation from there. It should be pretty close. What you see on the gist to what I'm demoing today, there may be some deviations as it was easier to do something else on my local computer. But all that should be there if you need it. And unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to make a gist within the organization. So that is tied to my GitHub account, but it's there, but it's part of this.
Yeah, and I want to chime in, Chad, as you're looking at this and just explain like why we care about this. If you can go back to the README.
Oh, sure.
So some of these things, because these are tasks I give Chad oftentimes. Reading the status of TCC. So as Chad mentioned, that's like when you see like the screen sharing, the camera, the microphone. So what we like to do is guide users through that process of like, once you open Zoom for the first time or Teams, turning on all these things, that first meeting isn't like a headache of trying to like share your screen and all that stuff. The hard part is getting a status of whether or not they did that step. So this allows us to create a script where it runs a video until they go through those different things. Encrypting files and strings. This is something where sometimes we need to save like a password to the user's computer or something like that. And in the past, we haven't had a great way of doing that. But
yeah, in the write-up, I kind of have this all going through, but I think it'll be easier if I just kind of jump through these one by one. So let's just starting with TCC.
Yeah, let's let you do that.
I have this function, and this is something you can easily use. But you pass it in what service, and I think even in the one that you'll see on the write-up is probably slightly newer, where it also includes what app. But you tell it, okay, I need the microphone. I need to know if the camera's been enabled. So as Chris was getting to, was so much of what we're used to with Apple databases with its preferences of knowing something's happening with an app, it's usually done in a plist file. So I should be able to do a defaults read and find out where that information is stored. But I wasn't, for those of you who remember the good old days where almost everything we did with Composer to make an application involved doing a snapshot, there was the trick of finding out which files got edited. And that's what I ended up resorting to. I ended up using the FS events to just pull in a list of every file that was being changed as I turned things on and off. And what was surprising is first I found this TCC database, but it didn't have everything I needed. It turns out it's actually split into 2 different places. So if you're used to those things where when you're looking at, in fact, let me drag this in here. When you're looking at privacy and security, the individual components that require you to be an admin are stored in library application support. The information that any standard user can authenticate are stored in /users library application support. And these are all being stored in SQLite. And the reason for using SQLite, as Chris and I were just discussing the other day when he was running into a particular joy of dealing withplists, P-lists are typically loaded in at the time the application runs, and then saved back out when the application quits. So any changes you make to the P-list file while that application is running may or may not take. They may get overwritten by the app quitting and saving out its P-lists. And because of the speed and efficiency needed, Apple has been moving certain things to using SQLite, to store that information. So here is the information you need. And again, I think the version that is in the gist has a newer version of this where I'm only pulling out the auth value, because in this one I'm then having to strip off just the number you need. But just to give an idea of what this then looks like, and as Chris mentioned, we're using DepNotify, one of our favorite tool in the box, to be able to show the user how to do this. And you'll notice I have things in here saying show a video of this. Well, I didn't have the time to make the videos, but what I'm doing is a little while loop to say, okay, check to see if they have screen sharing turned on. And as long as what I'm getting back from this function says it's off, just keep playing this video, keep showing them that we need it. And then when it's done, move on. And it looks something like this. So popping up, asking for OBS. So let's see if I can move some stuff around nicely. Of course, I'm not going to be able to move everything I want. So I'm going to go into, and by the way, Chris is talking about, oh, it's not that big of a change for Ventura. Well, it was. I practiced this a lot more before my update to Ventura. So when I click on OBS, now all of a sudden it's saying, okay, cool, enable the microphone. Higher up, microphone, flip on OBS. Within a couple of seconds, now enable camera. Now, the cool thing would be is if I could just actually automate writing this out to the database. I haven't tried it yet, but whatever. So this just gives us a nice tool to be able to guide the user through it. Using DepNotify, we can say, all right, what I need you to do now is open this, and we can have a video showing opening system preferences and turning that on.
Yeah, and I'll add, with a lot of these applications, they will bring up a dialog to enable those things. So the user doesn't always need to go manually over to system preferences.
Any questions or concerns about that before I move on? I seriously want to be able to have a button I can push on my computer to play Girl from Ipanema while I'm waiting to see if anybody. All right, if any other questions come up, give me a holler. The second one I've got, oops, something just came up in the chat. Oh, cool. I'm going to move this out of the way. So the next one I was going to talk about is encrypting strings in files. I'm going to start with files because it's easier. But the idea is, we've all done the thing, well, probably, at least a lot of us, we need to get information either from a user to, like, if for those of you who saw Kevin White's presentation on Superman, he talked about, the fact that right now it just sucks that you have to ask a user for their username and password for doing stuff like software update at some point. If you need to ask, thank you, Eric, if you need to ask somebody for their username and password, or store any particular piece of information on a computer that you're just concerned, maybe the fact that you're doing security through obscurity and hiding this file in some far off remote directory, and you've got permissions set so that it only belongs to root with 600 permissions or whatever. Sorry, I do octal notation for all that. If that's not good enough, what if I put information in that file that's encrypted? Well, since the beginning, we've had this ability to use, from the very first days of Mac OS, OpenSSL. And while for me, when I first started playing with OpenSSL, there are so many permissions, so many different options, so many different ways you can do things. I wanted to come up with a presentation of doing this that was as clean and Mac-like as I could. So in this case, I've got a plain text file. If you're familiar with lorem ipsum text, my wife recently introduced me to Jeffsum text. It's all random ramblings from Jeff Goldblum. So I've got a paragraph here, a couple paragraphs of Jeffsome text. And you'll notice there's no file in here currently called ciphertext. If I run this, it then shows out, here's the encrypted file, and it decrypts it back. But in the meantime, it has created the ciphertext. So it's a way that I could have a file sitting someplace that contains encrypted information that I can encrypt and decrypt the entire file in place. Now you'll notice I'm using as my key something relatively weak, and I've got an extra trick up my sleeve in a little bit. The other thing then is, what if I don't want to necessarily do the entire file? And I just gave away my little trick there. Like if I'm doing this with a plist, maybe within that plist we're talking about where I've got that locally cached information, I want to store something, but I don't want it to be sitting there in plain text in case somebody does a defaults read on it. I can simply take the yeah, I clearly this is going to be where Eric gets a lot of his filler text for a while. I can take the plain text and I can send it straight out. And by the way, the main two flags to know in here, ENC is for encryption. The AES 256, it's just one of many ciphers. It's generally considered the best of the ciphers in there. Minus E is for encryption, D for decryption. I'm doing base64 encoding, which is what you saw in that last file, because this makes it quote unquote human readable. Otherwise, even if you're taking plain text, when you run it through encryption, every 1 and 0 could be completely flipped. And half of the, almost half of those encodings, half of those bytes being changed are not going to be human readable characters and cannot be displayed on a screen. So I'm doing base64 and then just passing in the key. Now, if anybody who's done encryption, this is probably not the most secure way to do things, but at least I'm passing this in. I'm doing this within the script. Oh, and then all I had was just, here's me encrypting it and here's me pulling it back down. Considering we're coming up on the holiday season, anybody remember that particular reference? Okay, any questions or concerns? Yeah, there we go. Joseph got to it. I knew somebody would. Yeah. Shoot your eye out. Don't shoot your eye out. Any questions or concerns about encryption? Anybody have anything they can picture doing with this before I move on to my next one? Cool. Let me know it again, and I'll jump back over. What did I have next? Oh, configuring scripts. So one of the things I picked up, I'd already. For those of you who have been around for the last couple of years, you may remember that it's been an ongoing plague of mine that what I wanted to be able to do was I wanted to be able to do that kind of encryption, to be able to have something where I was passing in a certificate or something. I could use any one of a billion things in configuration profiles to have that key, to have an encryption key someplace that would be safe. And I thought about using using a certificate through Jamf to be able to do encryption. Now, all of my particular examples here are using what is called secret key encryption, meaning the exact same key that encrypts it is the exact same key that decrypts it. Whereas a lot of certificate-based communication, like with your web browser and everything, and I know I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of this, is public key. There's one key that encrypts and a mathematically similar but different key that decrypts, and you can only go one direction. So my thought was, what if I were to have a encryption key, and I'm just going to say it that way, the public key stored within a configuration profile, and then when I got that information stored in Jamf, an extension attribute could hold on to the private key and decrypt the information. So I started looking at what would it take to do this. Again, playing around, I just made let me pop over to my browser. So I've got a custom configuration profile, and I'm just simply calling it tech.rocketman.prefs. And I'm putting a bunch of stuff in here, more Jeff some text because man, this is just fun. But also I can gain everything that I get from a regular configuration profile. I can use those variables to say, what's the room number? What's the UDID? What's that JSS ID that normally I have to do an API call just to get that information back? Also potentially some sort of encryption key. So I can pass that, I can deploy this to my computer, and then within a script, I can say defaults read and pull that information out. Now, let me start by just doing a display of everything that's in here. Now you'll notice room number is empty because my computer's record is empty. But I could change, I don't want to break anything. I could change one of these and then push out that configuration profile again and get different information. The other thing then I was going to do was show the exact same idea of, all right, let's take, instead of having that exact same encryption system, instead of having the key stored within the script, what if I pull that from this configuration profile? So now I've got encrypted text that I could have had sitting in a different configuration profile, someplace safe, and I want to decrypt it. For those of you who saw that reference, yeah, there we go. Because I changed it. I had at one point my ciphertext was going to be the missile code from the end of War Games. So this is just another example of I can now, everybody else has been able to do this for a while, but I'm starting to enjoy the idea of configuring our scripts. If you've used any of our tech, you know that we love, and I in particular love, Chris and I do as much as humanly possible inside script parameters, like pass this piece of information and do everything within a script parameter, because it makes one single script that you can run a billion different ways just by passing in those parameters. You don't have to keep hard coding the script. But the place where that we keep running into challenges are, what if you've got like information you're passing into an onboarding where it's several paragraphs of text. You need to be able to have that displayed by dep notify. I can't easily pass that into a parameter because I lose my new lines. I'd have to encode and decode the new lines. I mean, there are ways I can do it, but it'd be nice if I could just have a big old block of text that a script can grab, like my Jeff some text, and display that entire block of text wherever I want. So yeah, this has become a bit of a game changer for me, because now we can have, as we continue to build out our Jamf Toolkit, we can, and we're managing these scripts on many clients' computers, instead of having to go into, let's take our onboarding script, for example. Right now, you grab our onboarding script, you place it in, and there's a block of text in the middle that you customize with all of my, now run this installation, do this configuration, do whatever, submit a recon, all that stuff that you have to configure. Well, if I come up with a new version of my onboarding script and I put it on your server, I've just overwritten all of your changes. So you have to go back in and change everything again. Going with this type of idea of storing that custom information in a configuration profile, now I can continue to upload my scripts and your little block remains the same no matter what I do to that script. Any questions, concerns, or why the heck is Chad spending this much time thinking about this kind of stuff? Because I know that's what Chris wonders most of the time. Cool. And then last but not least, this is kind of kicking it up a notch beyond any sort of encryption. What if I want to store something and just simply trust the Mac to store this information for me? For this one, I will have to go to my terminal in a second, but I want to, that's easier to read the code in here. Again, you can tell my particular references, but I want to be able to store information. Like if I were to get information from a user, even temporarily, what's a username and password, how can I just simply ask Mac's built-in security to store this information safely for me? The security add generic password well, this command with this parameter stores that information. Most of this is self-explanatory with the difference of the minus S standing for service. And that's why I'm using service instead of what my previous variable was. And I don't know, this one I think is more up to date also, or sorry, not as up to date as the one in my write-up. But that way I can just, and I'm just, because I don't like seeing all the standard out. And then I'm like, all right, now we need to get that information back and make sure that that came out. So far, this is all pretty straightforward. The challenge that I ran into though is, what if I want to update that information? There is a parameter, there is an option. I can simply say add generic password, and I can tell it to with I think it's a minus capital U to say if it already exists, just update it. I was completely, and if anybody has played with this, if anybody has played with doing keychain stuff and storing, and you've managed to successfully do an update, please let me know. Every time I did an update, it prompted the user for a password. I was completely unable to update the keychain with a script without triggering a user prompt. So the workaround that I came up with, as ugly as it is, delete the keychain item and then add it right back in. And then if I were doing this in a script where I didn't need that information after I used it, I could simply delete. I figured since I already showed off delete here, there was no point. But this looks something like this. So it says it's saved. Oh, wow, interesting. Save status of 45, huh? All righty, I know why that is. One moment, I'm going to completely hack and do what I just told you I wasn't going to do. Okay, now we'll turn that back off. I disabled this so that I could actually show you the keychain item, but it was erroring because it was attempting to insert it after it still existed for my last test right before the meetup. So now if I run this, it's going to say it saved it just fine. It was able to look it back up and find it for the user and everything I gave it to. If I come over here and bring up keychain, I now have this keychain item created at 146. If I go to, because I'm screen sharing, it didn't give me my Apple Watch as an option. And there's the password that it changed after it found the initial double one, it changed it to pencil. And yes, I did go back and rewatch the movie just to find out what were the ones that he logged in with in the school computer, because I thought it'd be funny. Code Runner. So this is just, like I said, this is just some stuff that we've been playing with as part of challenges Chris has thrown my way. It's like having my own little 400 class every couple of weeks. And so I figured if this was new to me, maybe this would be new to somebody else.